you've got Project Olive Branch, which we've alluded to throughout our conversation. And I think this is a great moment for you to talk about that.
Okay, no, thank you. So Project Olive Branch, which I had to explain to someone, was not an oil refinery for cooking. At a pitch one day, I said, "Oh, this is a tech investment pitch." Why? Yeah. So no, Project Olive Branch. Hopefully, I thought it was literal in its own name, but you know, an offering of conciliation. Yeah, it came. The idea was that as I was trying to speak to generate business for myself as a mediator, thinking, oh, it's pretty obvious. I can say what the value is, the success rates of mediation, the cost benefits. It was just doors being shut, or we have our people that we prefer to use. And it was a very strange thing for me coming out. And I like going into things naive, because once you've got a lot of experience of something, you kind of get entrenched as well. And as I've met people in the field, really respected people in the field, they've told me it's not going to work, as saying, we've done this before. So I like that. I like being naive about the sector. And as I started talking about it, I thought, well, I'm going to go back to my cohort of people that I trained with, fabulous barristers, some architects, you know, a whole mix of people in there, and asked them, and everyone was saying the same thing, raring to go, but can't get any work, can't even get observations, which again, no one's ever told you about the challenge of observations. I found one person who was offering, but they're charging fees to do observations.
And just for our listeners, when you train as a mediator, part of completing your training is to go and observe some mediations in action, and that's what you mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that then allows you to then become a registered member of something like the CMC, for example. Really important that gives confidence to, you know, the general public in terms of the quality of training and standing as a mediator. So if I started seeing that there's this great cohort of people, and I'm thinking, surely all you would have to do, because I'm reading some of their resume, just show somebody your resume and they're going to use you. It didn't quite work like that. So that was when we came up with the idea that if we speak to a solicitor's firm, because we're like, where do conflicts generally find themselves landing? It's with solicitors. So that's part of our model, is working with solicitors and giving them a platform. And that's why we moved away, said Project Olive Branch is not a mediation provider service. It is a technology infrastructure play. And what we do is we take away a lot of the difficulties in what makes onboarding of a mediation, because the mediation itself is a relatively straightforward process. It's a dialogue, it's a process. But the pre-mediation, the case management side of it, and more importantly, I found that was a big gap is some fabulous mediators, but when I speak to a solicitor, that's, well, I already have a civil and commercial mediator. And that's quite generic. How do you know that they're the right person? Well, if they're not, they'll probably recommend somebody else. So there was no intelligence in the way that things were being done. And from an auditability perspective, I looked at it from the solicitor's perspective, how do they justify how they introduced a mediator to it? Are they simply paying lip service to the pre-protocol action, which is, we engaged one, but it didn't quite work. I found actually most solicitors are positive to introducing mediation as part of litigation. And it might sound like it can't be, because, you know, they are potentially looking at billables, and why would they want to end a...
Well, there was a shift, wasn't there? I think there was a shift in litigation of being able to justify the costs, and the costs not exceeding the value of the claim.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was a big shift in the rules and the protocols, wasn't it? Because I mean, I know I mediated something where one party had already spent 30,000 in legal costs, and the other had spent like 9 in legal costs for something that was about $5,000.
Yeah, I think that was one of my first cases as mediator was a tenancy deposit, and it'd been in 22 months of hearings adjourned. Both sides had spent money on experts photography and it was £1,800. And anyway, it'd gone to the court, and we were part of the free mediation service. And fortunately, the judge said, "We have some mediators outside. I'm going to recommend that you go and have them. Please come back and give me some good news." At the end of it, they walked in really anxious and all of the rest. But by the end of it, they hugged it out. And I don't know how it got to this point. I then realised that the mediation, the solicitors, from the perspective of huge numbers of cases that are simply not economical to be litigated, means that people are not getting access to justice, which is, again, it comes back down to what we talked about earlier, being central to the theme. Why am I really interested in this? Why am I dedicating my time to something? And so I see there is an appetite from solicitors to say they understand that it's loss of goodwill simply to say to somebody. I was speaking to one solicitor and he said that he had a call from somebody asking if they would look at matters. And before he could speak, he said, "You're the 100th solicitor that I've called." And each have said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. We have a minimum amount on matters that we would litigate on. Why don't you try so-and-so? Why don't you Google?" And then he said, "I think mediation." And he said, "Look, you're the first solicitor who said mediation might be a better option." And then they, kind of referred to us. But that idea of incoming inquiries, that's where our platform comes in. So that's what Project Olive Branch does. It acts as a triage. I use triage because I'm from a clinical background. So I like the concept of, if you go into A&E, you don't simply go to the specialist. You're triaged. It's much more efficient. It makes the process work. It means that you get the needs that you actually do need. And I think that doesn't exist in conflict resolution. There is no triage, and that's effectively what Project Olive Branch is. It's a digital, intelligent triage service that works across the board, and it doesn't cannibalize anybody in the industry. We're not replacing directories. We're not replacing accreditation bodies. We're not replacing panels. We're simply saying that there's a process that's missing, and I think that might be part of it. We never pretend to say that we're going to solve why mediation is not mainstream and widely adopted as it should be. But I think it's a big part of the puzzle is if we can triage disputes, and that early part of the process, again, for mediators, huge amount of work in terms of accepting all the content. It might be emails, photos, contracts, etc. Working through those, understanding I'm not an adjudicator. We're not going to be ruling on these matters, but you still have to go through all of that. It'd be useful. So that's what Project Olive Branch effectively triages it, and then intelligently matches it to a database of mediators that have signed up to work with us, so that we're giving them workflow, but they're also being matched to the particularly right cases, so that in the end we get better resolutions.
Yep.